Hello. Peptides are everywhere right now, and I felt there was a lack of information that was easy for people who may not be in the medical or fitness space to digest and understand. And I want to start with a disclaimer that peptides are a gray market product, and there are peptides like GLP-1s, semaglutide, trizepatide that are FDA approved that you can get through a medical doctor, which I always recommend. Retatrutide is the one that I'm going to be talking about today, and it is very similar to semaglutide and trizepatide, very intense, and I think that it's always best if you do not have a medical condition, you are not medically obese, you don't have fatty liver or high triglycerides or other issues that need to be addressed medically, I suggest that you take the route of building the foundations first, making sure you get a dietitian if you have trouble with diet and exercise, as well as consulting a fitness professional for exercise advice. Most of the time when I hear people that have tried everything, I hear you, I understand. There's so many moving parts and there's so much to learn and so much to apply and so much that sometimes you feel you need to change or that you don't understand about what needs to change. But I really suggest trying a sustained calorie deficit with regular exercise, especially because this type of peptide, since it is similar in its mechanisms to semaglutide and trizepatide, so like Mounjaro and Ozempic, it can, if you are not eating correctly and dieting in a way that still sustains your life and your health, and as well as a good exercise routine, you can lose bone density and muscle mass, which are extremely important in longevity and living a long, healthy life. So I want you to feel sexy and good, and if you want to lose weight, that is totally up to you, but please do it in a healthy way first. And if you feel really lost, or maybe you struggle with something like, it's not PCOS anymore, I can't remember what the new acronym is, but there are other medical things that I'm sure can see benefits from using something like this, but retatrutide is a gray market product, and I recommend if you really want to try some medicinal help to manage symptoms like excess hunger and feeling full faster, I would go the trizepatide semaglutide route first, as retatrutide is more for extreme intervention and is a more extreme step than those two, but they have very similar outcomes as well as similar mechanisms. And so if you're looking for just the hunger control aspect, I would lean towards a GLP-1 or a trizepatide because the mechanisms are the same. The only thing that's different about retatrutide is that GLP-1 just targets one pathway, trizepatide is two, and then retatrutide does three, and the only difference is it has the added aspect of the glucagon pathway, which I'll explain in the video what that means. But disclaimer over, I want everybody to make educated decisions when it comes to peptides. Another disclaimer, if the person who is encouraging you to take this product is also selling it to you or has a discount code for this thing, please use extreme caution. And the reason why gray market products and not being FDA approved is a problem, it's okay if you don't trust the government and you're like, well, Red 40 was FDA approved. So the reason why I say to use caution is because when something is FDA approved, it has to go through certain steps to make sure that the dosage is correct, the purity is correct, as well as there's no contaminants. And that's why when you receive these vials of retatrutide, they say for experimental use only or for research only, because they are not a controlled substance in a way. So there's no telling what you're actually getting in that vial. And I'm sure that there are third-party tested websites if you really want to go this route, but please use extreme caution because not everybody who's selling a product has your best interests in mind. They have their own pockets in mind sometimes. And so please be very careful about what you're putting in your body. And mind you, retatrutide has not gone through a large analysis over time, so there's no saying what the long-term effects are. As we have found with Ozempic, there can be extreme impact on gut health and the longevity of that gut health, and it can cause gastroparesis, which essentially means that your gut turns into a rock and you can't digest things the same. And so please use extreme caution when putting things into your body, and always consult your doctor. I'm sure that they'll still have a conversation with you about it and lead you in the right direction if you trust them, and also be very aware of their intentions and just talk to a professional. Don't talk to the person selling it to you. So let's get into it. So retatrutide is also called Reta. A lot of fitness influencers are taking it right now. And what it is, I have my written notes, is it is a 39 amino chain or amino acid synthetic peptide linked to a fatty acid chain so that it lasts long enough for a week dose, very similar to Ozempic. And it is an injectable. I don't think that they have any other form of it right now besides an injectable. And it is a triple agonist, which means it activates receptors for a GLP-1, a GIP, and the one that I mentioned earlier, glucagon. And so these are 3 gut hormone pathways, and they regulate appetite, insulin, and energy use. So metabolic output, insulin is what controls your blood sugar, and appetite regulation is going to be your leptin response, I believe. And it's either leptin or ghrelin. I always mix them up. But it is not FDA approved, but it is in stage 3 trials. And it was developed originally for obesity and overweight, the weight management of those people, type 2 diabetes and metabolic disease, which can include things like fatty liver, impacts on the cardiovascular system, so on and so forth. And so it stacks 3 incretin and energy pathways, the ones that I mentioned earlier. So the GLP-1 agonism is what enhances or increases glucose-dependent insulin secretion and slows gastric emptying, so slows how quickly things move out of your stomach. So it can impact how full you feel and how fast you feel full. And it also reduces appetite via central action, which is very similar to a semaglutide. So that agonism is the same one that Ozempic uses, and it's the only one that it does. So this can lower your glucose, give you less hunger, and make you full faster. And the GIP agonism it also enhances insulin secretion in response to meals and may complement the GLP-1 in appetite and weight regulation, so also reduces appetite. And I want to make another disclaimer that just because you're not feeling hungry doesn't mean you shouldn't eat your daily recommended intake. So just because you feel like you could only eat 500 calories, you should use this to stick to the calorie deficit that is safest for your body. The best way to calculate this, if you don't want to use if the calculators online don't make a lot of sense to you, you can take your goal weight and multiply it by 11 or 12, and that should give you a good range and a safe range for where you currently are. And that would make sense for where you're going. But if you are in this category of being more overweight, I would calculate a deficit using one of the online calculators. It's going to be different for everybody, and you don't have to stick with those. If you feel extremely hungry, if you're feeling extremely hungry on this drug, you're probably eating way too less or not enough. And I would still really focus on protein intake because, again, this causes overall weight loss, not just fat loss. So if you aren't eating a good amount of protein, your body is also going to get rid of muscle because muscle is very metabolically expensive. What that means is that it takes calories to maintain muscle, and it needs energy to stay around, and it also needs resistance training to stay around. And that's why I say the combination of resistance training as well as eating enough is going to be really important. And I think that if you can probably push your deficit a little bit further because of these things, but it will be a lot easier to maintain a deficit. So you don't have to go to the extreme. If you go to the extreme, you are going to get rid of muscle mass, and you're just going to look like what people have coined the term of skinny fat. You're just going to look like a smaller version of where you were. But if you want to look toner, healthier, leaner, then make sure you're eating your protein and make sure you're eating enough for your body. And that usually for most, if you're a woman, it's probably going to be in the ranges of anywhere between 1,400, depending on your weight, anywhere between 1,400 to 1,800 calories. But it can be more than that. If you have a bigger body right now, you might be able to eat closer to 2,200. And my best rate of loss is if you're losing more than, I would say, 2 pounds of fat a week, you're pushing it a little too quickly. If you have a lot of weight to lose, then that could be a little bit different. But if you are pretty normal sized or just on the lower end of plus size, then I would say that losing more than a couple pounds a week can be more muscle mass loss than just fat loss. If you really want to focus on just fat loss, the most sustainable rate of loss is going to be about 2 pounds per week. Again, if you have more to lose, that number could look a little bit different and maybe fluctuate up towards 5, but anywhere more than 5 pounds a week is going to be really dangerous to your health and your muscle mass. So please eat the amount that you need. If you really struggle with feeling full, try some liquid calories, some protein shakes or smoothies so that it's easier to get it down and it doesn't sit in your stomach as heavily. But that's still very important. And I just wanted to make sure that I talked about that. But the GIP is very similar, appetite and weight regulation, and this retatrutide is more potent at GIP receptors than the GLP-1, and so it emphasizes that a little bit more. And so when you eat, it'll release more insulin. So if you already have issues with insulin sensitivity or that you are somewhere in the hypoglycemic, just make sure that, again, that you're aware of where your blood levels are and talk to your doctor about the dangers. Again, if you're just bring an honest conversation to them, they will probably still talk to you in an honest way and give you the information that you need, especially if you say, hey, I'm extremely considering taking this and I want your honest opinion. It's not going to sway my decision into, I don't want you to tell me to take it or not. But again, they might say, hey, you could get the same results with Ozempic, and just listen to them. And they know how to read your levels. And so please, if you have any pre-existing conditions, it's very important that you ask your doctor. And then the last agonism is the glucagon, which enhances your energy expenditure mildly and promotes fatty oxidation by activating glucagon receptors, while GLP-1 and GIP support glucose control and suppress excessive hyperglycemia. And so the effect of this is that a higher basal energy burn with better glucose handling with correct doses. Again, that's why gray market products can be dangerous, because if you're not taking the correct doses, it can be very up in the air on how much you're actually taking and what the potency is. And if you're experiencing some of the, I'll get into the side effects, but if you're experiencing extremes of the side effects, or more often you're experiencing the side effects than not, that probably means that your dose is too high. We saw that a lot in the really early Ozempic trials. Some of my earliest clients when I was living in California, it kicked off there a little bit quicker, and they would take the Ozempic and they'd be very nauseous, and they would start at a very high dose, and once they came down in their dose, they were actually seeing better results and felt much better, and they could actually eat to sustain their muscle mass. And so just keep that in mind. Lower your dose a little bit if you feel like you're experiencing the extremes, but I'll get into the side effects here shortly. So the overall physiological effect is strong appetite suppression and reduced caloric intake because of that suppression, which can help you maintain a caloric deficit. Again, please eat enough of the recommended daily intakes to make sure that you're maintaining your muscle mass and you're not having any other effects of not enough of your vitamins and minerals and other good macros like your fat. Especially as a woman, please make sure you're eating at least 45 grams of fat a day just for your hormones. Even if you are on a birth control, it's really important to just maintain. Fertility is a health marker. Even if you don't plan on having children or that's not in your future, it is important still, because those processes, when they get disrupted, it disrupts a lot of other things in your body. So please use caution in not eating enough fat. Most of the time, you want to also try to aim for at least 120 grams of carbs, because that's what your brain operates off of and uses for fuel. So if you're getting a lot of brain fog, try to make sure that you're within that range. And then protein for women, the daily recommended intake is with the FDA is anywhere between 90 to 120 grams of protein. I personally, because I like to maintain muscle mass as much as I can, I eat my goal weight in grams. And so right now I weigh about 145 and I'm trying to slowly lose. So I actually keep my protein a little bit higher than that. I'm eating 150 right now, but typically when I'm at my walking weight, I'll eat around 150 grams of protein. If you are new to eating enough protein, I would say you could probably be safe eating around 115 to 120 to help maintain your muscle mass. And also if you're exercising, it'll help you build more muscle mass. And so just keep that in mind. And then increase energy expenditure and fat mobilization. So the glucagon aspect of this will help you to mobilize some more fat for energy. And I think that also comes from being in a deficit. When you don't have as much food and you are in a deficit, your body leans more towards using fat to help you have energy and use it for energy mobilization. And so that's why it's also important to eat protein, because like I said, muscle is more metabolically expensive. So it might try to dump that muscle off first. This can probably help that a little bit. I haven't quite looked into that, but just keep that in mind. That's why protein is important and building muscle is important. I'm looking at you. But also improved insulin sensitivity and glycemic control. So mechanistically, it is like Ozempic and Mounjaro. and pushed one step further with the glucagon to drive intake down and expenditure up. So again, this can be really hard. It's like metabolic overdrive for some people if you don't necessarily need this. And so be very aware that if you're starting to get chest pains, your heart feels like it's working way harder, just be aware of how far you're pushing your body. Make sure you're hydrating as well. These things are also have a diuretic effect, which means that you don't hold on to liquids as well. And so keep in mind too, you're only supposed to do this in cycles, similar to when you do cycles for other things. You're not supposed to take it forever and ever. And so once you come off of a cycle, then you might gain about 5 pounds because it's going to be water weight. But as long as you're drinking enough water intake, that's going to flush out of your system. So don't get scared once you come off of it and your weight jumps up a little bit. That's normal, especially if you feel like you're eating a little bit differently and maybe there's other aspects to it like sodium intake or other things, but keep that in mind. And then the results in trial have been that there is an average of 14 to 24% of their body weight, their baseline body weight is lost over the course of 36 to 48 weeks. Keep in mind, there's 56 weeks in a year. So that means let me use a calculator. So I'm going to say, ideally, the people using this are using it for good reason. And so I'm going to use let's say 250. So if someone is 250 pounds and they are on the higher end of that range, let's say 20%, that could be, in a year, they would get down to about 200 pounds from 250. And you see how that's pretty gradual. They're not losing more than 1 million pounds in a week. And so being down about 50 pounds for a 250 pound person would be very healthy. And that would be a great sustained rate. And that's what they saw in trial. And of course, with the trials, this has medical oversight. So these people are getting the right tests done. They're making sure that they are being evaluated constantly to make sure that they're not doing things in a way that's harmful to their body. So keep that in mind. And then 100% of participants lost at least 5% of their baseline body weight by 48 weeks. So for someone who is also 250, I went to school for exercise science. I didn't go for... So if they were to lose that would be about 12, 13 pounds down. And so there's a guarantee that you'll lose at least that much weight. And that doesn't mean that if, say, you weigh 200 pounds and you want to be on that higher range, you could lose up to 40 pounds. So you could get down to 160. And then a smaller amount of that would be that you could probably guarantee losing about 5 pounds. But again, that is medically trialed and has medical oversight. So keep that in mind too. And also a good thing to notice is that people with metabolic issues, their liver fat normalized in 9 out of 10 patients, which is also really good. So into the side effects and the dangers, because this is really important. So the common ones that I said, that if you have excess of these, to ask about your dosage and make sure that you're getting a dosage that is correct for your body, is the gastrointestinal ones that you also see with Ozempic and Trizepatide, is nausea, vomiting, an extreme decrease in appetite, diarrhea, constipation, very similar to GLP-1. And then the serious side effects are pancreatic inflammation, so pancreatitis, gallbladder disease, acute kidney injury, and hypoglycemia. So if you have any pre-existing thyroid, kidney, liver, gallbladder, or cardiovascular risks because it runs in your family or you've had previous issues with it, that's why it's really important to lean more towards that GLP-1 Trizepatide route, because you want to have medical evaluation in case you do experience some of these more serious risks. I think that's why it's important to note that that's why the FDA approving this could be really helpful, so that people can have that medical oversight. And so keep that in mind. And then the unknowns, because we don't have enough time to watch these things, are the impact on the heart. And with it increasing your metabolic output, there is a risk of those things. And the cancer side effects and the adverse events, there's just not enough time to see these things. Adverse events would be things that aren't even on their radar yet, but could start to become common, like the gastroparesis with the Ozempic trials. And so something that concerns me in peptides, not necessarily the way that this peptide works, but in other peptides, is that which could also increase the cellular regeneration of pre-cancer cells or already existing cancer cells that they didn't have awareness of. And I don't know if it has the ability to decipher which cell to increase production of, or what they or not. And so if you already have or precancerous cells, it can increase the amount of those. So that's a very real risk to consider as well if cancer runs in your family. Something also why you should lean towards those other medically evaluated versions. And then again, it's investigational, so it's not regulated. So impurity, contamination, and wrong dosing is a very real risk. And it is not a hack. It is not something that you should use just because you want to lose a couple pounds or that you're not feeling very good about yourself. Again, the foundations are going to be extremely important in those things, and also your psychological health, because if you feel the need to run the risk of these very extreme and real risks that I've mentioned because you just simply want to lose a couple pounds or you want to be a little bit skinnier, you should really talk to a therapist, honestly, about what that's presenting and where that comes from. Because I think that a lot of times I used to struggle with a binge eating disorder, and I did extensive therapy to understand where that came from and what it means to me, and break that dopamine cycle of I feel bad, I eat, I get the dopamine hit, and then I feel bad again, and then the cycle repeats. That's what a binge eating disorder is. So if you're having trouble with the food noise, I would really try to address the root issue with any of these things. And all of these things have a root issue typically. And if you don't solve the root issue, once you come off of these things, the root issue is still going to be there. And you won't be able to manage the symptoms until you come off of that cycle. And usually if you have to cycle something for 4 weeks, you usually have to take about 4 weeks off until you can cycle again. And so keep that in mind. That's a very real thing to consider. And I think that most medications, not all of them, but a lot of them, I would say 95% of them or more, manage symptoms, but they don't treat root issues. So if you are not treating the root issue of a problem, it is going to continue to be prevalent in your life. And that's something also to take into account. If you haven't worked on managing the root issue, or if you're not using this as a tool to help you figure out and manage the root issue, then you're using it for the wrong reasons. And you really need to consider why you're willing to sacrifice your health and longevity just for something that you're not willing to face. And I know that can be a really hard journey, and that's why I say use it as a tool. If that's something that you just feel like you don't have the bandwidth or the knowledge to manage and you need to make a change right now, then taking one of those other drugs like Ozempic or Mounjaro would be a better route for you, so that you can talk to a doctor and have that help while you're going through this, because there's obviously something bigger at play and you need to address the psychological underlying tone of why you want this thing. And it's okay to want to feel sexy and want to feel more confident and want to lose some weight for you feeling better about yourself, but also make sure that you can maintain it. You want to learn the skills. You want to learn how to eat correctly to maintain this and come out and reverse out of this diet so that you can enjoy more food and still feel really good about yourself, and also maintain a good, healthy physique with muscle mass so that you can live longer. And if you want to have kids, you can see your grandkids, or even if you just have other goals, you want to see the world, that you're making sure you're taking care of yourself in a way that you're able to do those things. And don't risk a short-term result, instant gratification, for long-term damage. I just don't think that we should be operating in that way. So I'm all for you wanting to do what you think is best for yourself. I don't know your journey, but I think it's really important for people to be honest about the risks and the route that you should take. I'm not a medical professional, but I am a personal trainer. I've been a personal trainer for about 10 years. I do have my degree in exercise science, so I understand the mechanisms that this drug is operating within. And I can also give sound advice on how to lose weight, how to build muscle, how to have longevity, and how to see these results without having to take a drug. But I do understand that there's different aspects and levels to everybody's understanding of these things and their ability to execute them. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't do what you think is best for you. I'm saying that be very intentional in the choices that you make, and be honest with yourself if you actually have tried sustaining a calorie deficit. And if you're noticing those issues with binge eating or struggle maintaining the deficit, that's where you can address the other underlying things. And if you feel like you want to use them in tandem, then that's okay. But make sure that you are actually addressing the root issue. Otherwise, this will never go away. And this is a very powerful, potent drug, Retatrutide. And I think that it's important to be medically evaluated before you start this if you have decided to go this route, because there are real risks and there's not a lot of data on the long-term effects on the human body. And I think it's really important to do things from a place of love instead of a place of hate. Whenever I tried to do and make decisions for my body and my mind out of a place of hate or self-distrust or any sort of negative correlation with my body or my mind, it never resulted in feeling better. It's just on to the next thing to try and the next hack, and that's not sustainable. And I want you to have a sustainable, healthy life and confidence, and the only way to do that is to treat the root issue and do things from a place of love and understanding. And it's okay to feel like you can love and understand yourself and still make these choices, but make sure that they're educated choices and not just because everybody else is jumping on the bandwagon. So I hope this was informative and helpful, and let me know if you guys have any questions.